Amelia Dawson stepped off the bus into the dusty Nevada heat, her backpack slung over one shoulder. The airbase loomed ahead, a sprawling complex of hangars and runways under a relentless sun. She'd come to Nellie's Air Force Base for a civilian tour, a bucket list item inspired by her late father's stories of his days as a fighter pilot. At 28, Amelia was a librarian from Boise, soft-spoken and unassuming, her glasses slipping down her nose as she adjusted to the desert glare. The other tourists, mostly retirees and aviation buffs, chattered excitedly, but Amelia felt out of place, her quiet demeanor drawing smirks from the group's self-appointed leader, Greg Thompson, a loud retiree in a bomber jacket. "Look at the tourist," he muttered to his buddy, loud enough for her to hear. "Bet she thinks this is a theme park." The tour guide, Captain Bradley Myers, a stern officer with a clipboard, barely acknowledged her as he herded the group toward the hangar. Amelia's excitement waned as Greg's comments continued, his voice carrying over the hum of jet engines. "She's probably here for Instagram," he scoffed, eyeing her phone as she snapped a photo of an F-16. Amelia bit her lip, her cheeks burning. She'd spent months researching the base, memorizing specs of the jets her dad once flew, but Greg's mockery made her feel small. Even Bradley seemed to dismiss her, answering her question about cockpit controls with a curt, "Let's keep it basic for the civilians." As the tour moved to the runway, Amelia noticed a young pilot, Lieutenant Ethan Caldwell, prepping for a training flight. His easy smile and quick wave to the group stood out against Bradley's cold efficiency. Amelia lingered near the edge of the observation area, watching Ethan climb into his jet. The group was led to a viewing platform, but Greg's constant jabs, now about her nerdy notebook, grated on her nerves. She focused on the jets, her dad's stories echoing in her mind. "Always watch the skis, kid. You never know what's coming." Then it happened. Ethan's jet mid-takeoff lurched unnaturally. A flock of birds had crossed the runway and the engine's whine turned into a sickening sputter. The crowd gasped, but Bradley barked at them to stay put. Amelia's heart raced. She'd read about bird strikes, her dad's old manuals had detailed the risks. Without thinking, she broke from the group, sprinting toward the control tower's access gate. Greg shouted, "What's the tourist doing?" But she ignored him. Her pulse pounded as she waved her arms, signaling the ground crew. She knew the tower needed to know Ethan's jet was in trouble fast. Bradley's voice boomed behind her, "Get back here." But Amelia was already moving, her instincts overriding her fear. Amelia reached the gate, breathless, and yelled to a startled crewman about the bird strike. He radioed the tower, and within seconds they were scrambling to guide Ethan's jet back. The engine was failing, but her quick action gave them precious seconds. As she stood panting, Bradley stormed over, his face red with fury. "You're not authorized to interfere," he snapped. Amelia, trembling but defiant, shot back, "Someone had to." The crewman nodded at her, a flicker of respect in his eyes. Ethan's jet touched down, wobbling but safe. Amelia exhaled, her heart still racing, unaware that this was only the beginning of her ordeal. Amelia stood by the gate, her chest heaving as the ground crew rushed toward Ethan's jet. The screech of emergency vehicles filled the air, their lights flashing against the runway's asphalt. Lieutenant Ethan Caldwell climbed out, shaken but unharmed, his helmet tucked under his arm. He glanced toward Amelia, his expression a mix of confusion and gratitude, but Captain Bradley Myers was already bearing down on her. "You're in serious trouble," he hissed, his clipboard jabbing the air. "Civilians don't run onto restricted areas." Amelia's throat tightened. She acted on instinct, driven by her father's stories of quick thinking saving lives, but now she faced Bradley's wrath. Greg Thompson, lingering nearby with the tour group, smirked. "Told you she's just a tourist playing hero," he said loudly, earning chuckles from a few others. The crewman who'd radioed the tower, a wiry man named Sergeant Derek Larson, stepped forward. "She flagged the issue before we even saw it," he said, his tone steady but firm. Bradley's eyes narrowed, but he didn't respond. Instead, he ordered Amelia to follow him to the security office. Her stomach churned as she trailed behind, the group's whispers trailing like a bad smell. Greg's voice carried. "Bet she's regretting that stunt now." Amelia clutched her notebook, her notes on jet mechanics smudged from her sweaty palms. She wasn't trying to be a hero. She just couldn't stand by and do nothing. In the security office, a cramped room with flickering fluorescent lights, Bradley grilled her. "What makes you think you can disrupt operations?" he demanded. Amelia, her voice shaky but clear, explained her knowledge of bird strikes from her dad's manuals. "I knew the engine could flame out. I had to act." Bradley scoffed, but a senior officer, Major Olivia Bennett, entered, her presence commanding. She'd overheard the exchange and asked Derek to confirm Amelia's story. "She's right," Derek said. "Her signal gave us a head start. The pilot might have ejected otherwise." Olivia's gaze softened slightly, but Bradley insisted on protocol. "She broke formation. That's a security breach." Amelia's face flushed. She hadn't meant to cause trouble, but Bradley's accusation stung. Olivia, however, waved him off. "We'll handle this. Return to your group, Captain." Bradley stormed out, leaving Amelia with Olivia and Derek. Olivia asked about her background, and Amelia shared her father's history as a pilot, her voice cracking as she mentioned his death 5 years ago. Olivia nodded, scribbling a note. "You've got instincts," she said, "but you're not trained for this environment." Amelia apologized, her relief tinged with dread. Would she be banned from the base? Fined. As she left the office, she caught Ethan's eye outside. He mouthed, "Thank you," before being whisked away. Back with the tour group, Greg's smug grin greeted her, and she knew this wasn't over. The whispers followed her, but so did a quiet resolve. She'd done the right thing, no matter what they thought. Amelia rejoined the tour group, her legs shaky but her chin lifted. The other tourists stared, some with curiosity, others with judgment. Greg Thompson, leaning against a railing, didn't miss his chance. "Well, look who's back from her little adventure," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "Thought you'd get a medal or something." A few retirees chuckled, but Amelia ignored him, her focus drifting to the runway where Ethan's jet was being towed away. The reality of what she'd done, running toward danger, defying orders, hit her hard. Her dad's voice echoed in her mind. "Courage isn't loud, kid. It's just doing what needs doing." But now she felt exposed, like a spotlight was pinned on her. Captain Bradley Myers returned, his expression still sour. He announced the tour would continue but kept a sharp eye on Amelia, as if daring her to step out of line again. The group moved to a briefing room for a lecture on flight operations, but Amelia could barely focus. Her notebook lay open, her pen idle. She kept replaying the moment she'd sprinted to the gate, the adrenaline, the fear. Had she really saved Ethan? Or was she just a reckless civilian, as Bradley claimed? Greg's occasional snickers from across the room didn't help. "Tourist thinks she's Top Gun," he muttered to a woman next to him, who nodded eagerly. As the lecture droned on, a young airman slipped into the room and whispered to Bradley. His face tightened, and he excused himself, leaving the group with a civilian guide named Corinne Walsh, a cheerful woman who seemed oblivious to the tension. Corinne led them to a simulator area where tourists could try a basic flight program. Amelia hesitated, but Corinne encouraged her to join. "You look like you've got a knack for this," she said with a wink. Amelia managed a small smile, climbing into the simulator. Her hands moved instinctively, guided by years of reading her dad's manuals. She nailed the basic maneuvers, earning a surprised nod from Corinne. For a moment, she felt a spark of pride. But the moment was short-lived. Bradley returned, pulling Amelia aside. "We're not done," he said curtly. "You've caused a lot of paperwork." Her stomach sank. He led her to a small office where Major Olivia Bennett waited, her expression unreadable. Olivia explained that while Amelia's actions had been helpful, they'd violated strict protocols. "We can't have civilians running loose," she said. "There'll be an inquiry." Amelia's heart pounded. An inquiry. She stammered an apology, but Olivia raised a hand. "That said, Lieutenant Caldwell's report credits your quick thinking. He's safe because of you." Amelia blinked, torn between relief and dread. As she returned to the group, Greg's smug voice cut through. "Trouble again, huh?" She clenched her fists, determined not to let him see her falter. The tour was ending, but her fight was just beginning. Amelia's palms sweated as the tour group shuffled toward the final stop, a museum showcasing retired jets. The weight of the inquiry hung over her like a storm cloud. She acted to save a life, but Captain Bradley Myers seemed determined to make her regret it. His clipped orders to the group, "Stay in line, no photos," felt pointedly aimed at her. Greg Thompson, meanwhile, was relentless, whispering to anyone who'd listen. "She's gonna get banned for sure," he said, loud enough for Amelia to hear. She kept her eyes on the sleek lines of a displayed F4 Phantom, her dad's favorite, trying to anchor herself in his memory. But her thoughts spiraled. What if she faced legal trouble? Fines. Her savings were modest, and her librarian job barely covered her rent. In the museum, Karen Walsh, the civilian guide, noticed Amelia's quiet demeanor. "You okay, hun?" she asked, her voice kind. Amelia nodded, but her throat was tight. She didn't dare mention the inquiry, not with Greg eavesdropping nearby. Karen handed her a pamphlet about the base's history, her smile warm. "Your dad would be proud," she said softly, as if sensing Amelia's connection to the place. The words hit hard, and Amelia blinked back tears. She wanted to believe it, but Bradley's earlier threat echoed. "You've caused a lot of paperwork." As the group gathered for a final Q&A, Lieutenant Ethan Caldwell appeared, his flight suit still wrinkled from the earlier chaos. The tourists buzzed with excitement, but Ethan's eyes found Amelia. "I owe you one," he said, loud enough for the group to hear. Greg's smirk faltered, and a few tourists murmured in surprise. Ethan explained how the bird strike had nearly forced him to eject, but the tower's quick response, thanks to Amelia, gave him time to land. Bradley, standing nearby, shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Amelia's face warmed, but she managed a shy, "I'm just glad you're okay." The moment was fleeting. Bradley stepped forward, cutting Ethan off to wrap up the tour. As the group boarded the bus, he pulled Amelia aside again. "Don't think this makes you a hero," he said coldly. "You'll hear from us about the inquiry." Her stomach twisted, but she nodded, refusing to shrink under his glare. On the bus, Greg leaned over. "Still in trouble, huh, tourist?" His tone was gleeful, and Amelia's patience snapped. "At least I did something useful," she said, her voice steady. Greg blinked, caught off guard, and the woman next to him stifled a laugh. Back at her hotel that evening, Amelia sat on the edge of her bed, her notebook open to a page of jet schematics. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "This is Ethan. Can we talk?" Her heart skipped. Was this about the inquiry or something else? She typed a cautious reply, her mind racing. She'd come to Nellie's to honor her dad, not to stir up trouble. But now she was in deeper than she'd ever imagined. Amelia's phone glowed in the dim hotel room as she read Ethan's message again. "Can we meet tomorrow? I want to thank you properly." Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure. Was this allowed? The inquiry loomed, and Captain Bradley Myers' warning still stung. But Ethan's gratitude felt like the only bright spot in a day of chaos. She typed, "Sure, where?" and hit send before she could overthink it. A reply came quickly. "A coffee shop near the base, 9 a.m. Amelia exhaled, setting her phone down. She lay back, staring at the ceiling, her dad's old stories swirling in her mind. He'd always said pilots looked out for each other. Maybe Ethan was just being kind. The next morning she arrived at the coffee shop, a small place packed with locals and a few uniformed airmen. Ethan was already there, his flight suit traded for jeans and a t-shirt. He waved her over, his smile easy but tired. "You saved my ass yesterday," he said, sliding a coffee toward her. Amelia blushed, pushing up her glasses. "I just reacted," she said. Ethan shook his head. "Most people freeze. You didn't." He leaned forward, explaining how her signal had given the tower critical seconds to guide him down. Without it, he might have crashed in the desert. Amelia sipped her coffee, warmth spreading through her, but the inquiry nagged at her. She told Ethan about Bradley's reaction, the paperwork threat. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Bradley's a stickler for rules," he said, "but Major Bennett's fair. She'll see you meant well." His reassurance helped, but Amelia couldn't shake her nerves. As they talked, she shared her dad's history as a pilot, his love for the F-16. Ethan listened, his eyes softening. "Sounds like you inherited his instincts," he said. For the first time, Amelia felt seen, not as a tourist, but as someone who belonged. Back at the base, Amelia was summoned to a meeting with Major Olivia Bennett. The office was stark, with maps and charts lining the walls. Olivia sat across from her, her expression neutral. "Your actions were reckless," she began, and Amelia's heart sank. "But effective. The inquiries concluded no charges, but you're barred from future tour." Amelia nodded, relief mixing with disappointment. She'd never see Nellie's again, but she'd made a difference. Olivia stood, extending a hand. "You've got guts, Miss Dawson. Use them wisely." Amelia shook her hand, a flicker of pride igniting. Outside, she spotted Greg Thompson near the visitor center, bragging to another group about knowing the base inside out. He saw her and sneered. "Still here, tourist." Amelia straightened, her voice calm but firm. "Not for long, but I did more yesterday than you'll ever do." Greg's face reddened as she walked away, her head high. Ethan's words, Olivia's handshake, they fueled her. She wasn't just a librarian from Boise anymore. She stepped into her dad's world and left her mark, no matter what anyone called her. Amelia drove away from Nellie's, the desert stretching endlessly before her. The base's gates faded in her rearview mirror, but the weight of the past 2 days lingered. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Safe travels. Let me know if you're ever back in Nevada." She smiled, tucking the phone away. The inquiry's outcome, no charges but a ban, felt like a bittersweet victory. She'd honored her dad's memory, but at a cost. The open road gave her space to think, to process. She wasn't the timid librarian who'd stepped off the bus. She'd faced Bradley's wrath, Greg's mockery, and her own doubts, and come out stronger. Back in Boise, Amelia returned to her quiet life at the library, shelving books and helping patrons. But something had shifted. Her coworkers noticed her newfound confidence, the way she carried herself with a quiet resolve. She kept Ethan's number but didn't text, unsure if their connection was more than a moment of shared adrenaline. Instead, she poured her energy into a project, digitizing her dad's old flight manuals. The work felt like a tribute, a way to keep his legacy alive. Late at night, she'd read his notes, smiling at his meticulous handwriting, feeling closer to him than ever. Weeks later, a letter arrived from Nellie stamped with the base's insignia. Her hands trembled as she opened it. It was from Major Olivia Bennett, formal but warm. "Your actions on the tour demonstrated remarkable initiative," it read. "While protocol limits civilian involvement, your quick thinking saved a pilot and an aircraft. Enclosed is a commendation for your courage." Amelia's eyes widened. A commendation. She hadn't expected recognition, let alone praise. The letter included a small pin, an Air Force emblem. She pinned it to her jacket, her chest swelling with pride. Word spread in her small town. A local reporter caught wind of the story and interviewed her, publishing a piece titled "Librarian's Quick Thinking Saves Pilot." Amelia cringed at the attention but couldn't deny the warmth it brought. Her coworkers threw a small party, and even her grumpy neighbor, Mr. Jenkins, gave her a nod of respect. But not everyone was thrilled. At a library event, she overheard a familiar voice, Greg Thompson, visiting Boise for a family reunion. He'd seen the article and cornered her. "Still milking that hero act, huh?" he said, his tone bitter. Amelia met his gaze. "I didn't do it for attention. I did it because it was right." Greg had no comeback. He muttered something and walked away, his usual bravado deflated. Amelia watched him go, feeling a quiet triumph. She'd spent years doubting herself, hiding behind books and her dad's stories. But Nellie's had changed her. She'd faced a crisis, stood up to authority, and silenced her critics, not with anger but with action. As she locked up the library that night, the Air Force pin glinted on her jacket. She touched it, thinking of her dad. "I did it," she whispered, knowing he'd be smiling somewhere. Amelia's life settled into a new rhythm, but the Nellie's incident stayed with her, a touchstone of courage. The Air Force pin became a daily reminder, tucked into her pocket as she worked at the library. She'd catch herself glancing at it during quiet moments, her fingers tracing its edges. The commendation letter hung framed in her small apartment, next to a photo of her dad in his flight suit. She'd stare at it, wondering what he'd say about her split-second decision to run toward the gate. "That's my girl," she imagined, and the thought carried her through long shifts. Ethan texted occasionally, sharing updates about his training flights. Their conversations were light, jokes about bad coffee, stories of her dad's old pranks in the Air Force. But Amelia sensed a boundary. He was a pilot, she was a civilian. Still, his messages brightened her days, a quiet connection to the world she'd briefly entered. She didn't tell her coworkers about him, keeping the friendship private, like a secret she wasn't ready to share. Instead, she focused on her digitization project, scanning her dad's manuals page by page. Each one felt like a conversation with him, his voice alive in the technical jargon and scribbled notes. One evening, a library patron, an older man named Harold, noticed her working on the manuals. "You into planes?" he asked, his eyes crinkling. Amelia hesitated, then shared her Nellie's story. Harold, a retired mechanic, lit up. "I worked on F-16s in the '80s," he said, launching into tales of his own. They talked for hours, and soon Harold was helping with the project, offering insights into the manual's faded diagrams. Their collaboration drew others: a local history buff, a teenage aviation nerd. The library became a hub for these quiet enthusiasts, and Amelia found herself leading, her voice steady where it once wavered. But not everything was smooth. Greg Thompson's visit to Boise had left ripples. He'd posted online, calling Amelia's commendation overblown and her actions reckless. The post, on a small aviation forum, gained traction among a few Nellie's regulars who sided with Captain Bradley Myers' strict view of protocol. Amelia stumbled across it one night, her stomach twisting at the familiar word, tourist. She wanted to fire back to defend herself, but stopped. Instead, she emailed Major Olivia Bennett, asking if the commendation could be clarified publicly. Olivia's reply was prompt. "The record stands. Your actions saved a life. Ignore the noise." The next week, a follow-up article appeared in the local paper, quoting Olivia's statement and Ethan's gratitude. Greg's forum post faded into obscurity, drowned out by the truth. Amelia felt lighter, as if she'd shed a weight she hadn't known she carried. At the library, Harold handed her a coffee and grinned. "You're a hell of a librarian," he said. Amelia laughed, the sound freer than it had been in years. She wasn't just her dad's daughter anymore. She was Amelia Dawson, the woman who'd broken formation and found her own. Amelia's library project grew, turning into a community effort that surprised even her. Harold and the others brought in old photos, logbooks, and even a few worn patches from their Air Force days. The group met weekly, cataloging stories alongside the manuals, their voices filling the library's quiet corners. Amelia found herself at the center, organizing, listening, and occasionally sharing her Nellie's story when new members asked. Each retelling felt less like a boast and more like a fact, a piece of who she was. The teenage aviation nerd, Liam, started calling her Captain Dawson, half joking but with a glint of admiration. She'd roll her eyes but secretly loved it. Ethan's texts became less frequent as his training intensified, but one message stood out: an invitation to a small aviation event in Reno, where he'd be speaking about flight safety. "Bring your dad's manuals," he wrote. "People would love them." Amelia hesitated. Reno was a 6-hour drive, and the thought of stepping back into that world, where people like Greg or Bradley might judge her, made her uneasy. But Liam overheard her mention it and pushed. "You have to go," he said. "You're basically a legend." She booked a hotel that night, her nerves buzzing with anticipation. The Reno event was a modest affair, held in a community center packed with pilots, mechanics, and enthusiasts. Amelia arrived, clutching a box of her dad's manuals. Ethan spotted her instantly, his grin wide as he introduced her to his colleagues. "This is the woman who saved my jet," he said, and the room turned to her, curious. Amelia's cheeks burned, but she spoke, sharing her dad's legacy and her Nellie's moment. The crowd listened, rapt, and a retired colonel even asked to borrow a manual for a museum display. For once, she didn't feel like an outsider. But the past wasn't done with her. Captain Bradley Myers was there, standing at the back, his arms crossed. Amelia's stomach dropped, but she kept talking, her voice steady. After he approached, his expression softer than she remembered. "I was hard on you," he said gruffly. "Protocol matters, but you did good." It wasn't an apology, but it was close. Amelia nodded, her throat tight. "I just wanted to help," she said. Bradley gave a curt nod and walked away, leaving her lighter than she'd expected. As the event ended, Ethan pulled her aside. "You ever think about working in aviation?" he asked. "You've got the mind for it." Amelia laughed, brushing it off, but his words stuck. Back in Boise, she looked into aviation history programs, her dad's manuals spread across her table. The idea felt daunting but right. She wasn't a pilot, but she could preserve their stories, their knowledge. The library group cheered her on, and Liam made her a mock Captain Dawson patch. She pinned it next to her Air Force emblem, a symbol of the woman she was becoming, someone who didn't just read about courage but lived it. Amelia's decision to explore aviation history sparked a new chapter in her life. She enrolled in an online program, balancing it with her library job. The coursework was intense: archival methods, oral history techniques, but it felt like a natural extension of her dad's legacy. Her library group became her cheerleaders, with Harold offering gruff encouragement and Liam bombarding her with plain facts. They even started a small exhibit displaying her dad's manuals alongside photos and stories from local veterans. The community took notice, and the library's director, Ellen, praised Amelia's initiative. "You're putting us on the map," she said, her smile proud. Ethan stayed in touch, his texts now peppered with questions about her studies. He'd send photos from the cockpit, joking about her saving his ass again if he hit turbulence. Their banter grew easier, and Amelia found herself looking forward to his messages. One evening he called, his voice hesitant. "There's a job opening at Nellie's," he said. "Archivist for their historical records. You'd be perfect." Amelia's heart raced. Nellie's, the place where she'd been called a tourist, banned for her actions. The idea was thrilling but terrifying. She promised to think about it, her mind spinning as she hung up. The next day she found a package at her door, a Nellie's patch and a note from Major Olivia Bennett. "Heard about your project. If you're ever ready to join us, we'd be lucky to have you." Amelia's eyes stung. The ban was still in place, but Olivia's note hinted at a possible exception for a job. She spent hours researching the role, her dad's manuals open beside her. It would mean leaving Boise, her quiet life, her library family. But it also meant stepping fully into the world her dad had loved. At the next library meeting, she shared the opportunity. Harold clapped her on the shoulder. "You belong there," he said. Liam, ever dramatic, declared her Boise's aviation hero. Even Ellen chimed in, offering to write a recommendation. Amelia laughed, overwhelmed by their support, but doubt lingered. Could she handle the scrutiny of a place like Nellie's? Greg's old taunts echoed faintly, but she pushed them aside. She wasn't that timid tourist anymore. She applied, her application a mix of her library experience and her Nellie's story. Weeks later, an email arrived, an interview offer. Amelia flew to Nevada, her stomach in knots. At Nellie's, she met Olivia, who greeted her warmly. "You've already proven you can handle pressure," Olivia said. The interview went well, but as Amelia left, she spotted Greg Thompson in the visitor lot, there for another tour. He didn't see her, but his presence was a reminder of the past. She squared her shoulders, refusing to let him dim her moment. Back in Boise, she waited, her Air Force pin in her pocket. When the call came, offering her the job, she whispered to her dad's phone, "We did it." She was ready to break formation again. Amelia packed her Boise apartment, her dad's manuals carefully boxed alongside her Air Force pin and commendation letter. The move to Nellie's felt surreal, like stepping into one of her dad's stories. Her library group threw a farewell party, with Liam presenting a scrapbook of their aviation project. Harold, gruff as ever, slipped her a worn wrench from his mechanic days. "For luck," he muttered, his eyes misty. Ellen hugged her tightly, whispering, "You're going to soar." Amelia's throat tightened as she drove away, Boise shrinking in her rear view. Nellie's was a chance to honor her dad, but it was also her own beginning. At the base, she settled into her role as an archivist, organizing records of past missions and pilot logs. The work was meticulous, but every document felt alive with history. Her office was small, tucked in a quiet corner of the base, but Major Olivia Bennett checked in often, her approval clear. "You're a natural," she said, flipping through Amelia's first catalogued collection. Even Captain Bradley Myers, though still stiff, gave her a nod when they passed in the halls. It wasn't warmth, but it was progress. Amelia kept her head down, determined to prove her worth beyond that one chaotic day. Ethan became a regular presence, stopping by with coffee or quick stories from his flights. Their friendship deepened, rooted in shared respect. One evening, over burgers at an off-base diner, he admitted, "I wasn't sure you'd take the job. Nellie's can be intimidating." Amelia laughed, stirring her soda. "I'm still figuring it out," she said, "but it feels right." He grinned, raising his glass, "to breaking formation." She clinked her glass against his, her heart lighter than it had been in years. The past wasn't entirely gone, though. One afternoon, while sorting through old flight logs, Amelia overheard a familiar voice in the visitor center, Greg Thompson, back for another tour. Her pulse quickened, but she stayed at her desk, focusing on a faded logbook. Greg's voice carried, bragging about knowing the real Nellies. She could have confronted him, but instead she smiled to herself. His words didn't sting anymore. She was no tourist. She was part of the base's heartbeat now. Months later, Amelia's work caught wider attention. A national aviation magazine featured her project, highlighting her role in preserving Nellie's history. The article mentioned her actions during the bird strike, calling her the librarian who saved a pilot. Ethan texted her a screenshot adding, "Told you you're a legend." Amelia blushed, but pride warmed her. At a base ceremony, Olivia presented her with a formal certificate, her name etched alongside her dad's old squadron. As she stood on the stage, the crowd's applause drowned out any lingering doubts. She'd come to Nellie's chasing her dad's legacy but had built her own. Touching the pin in her pocket, she thought of him. "We're flying together now," she whispered, knowing she'd found her place, not as a tourist, but as a keeper of stories that would soar for generations. Amelia's role at Nellie's grew more demanding, but she thrived in the rhythm of it. Sorting through decades-old flight logs, she uncovered stories of pilots like her dad, men and women who'd faced split-second decisions in the sky. Each document felt like a thread connecting her to him, and she poured herself into preserving them. Her colleagues, a mix of civilian archivists and military staff, respected her quiet competence. Even Captain Bradley Myers softened over time, once stopping by her office to drop off a box of declassified records. "Thought you'd make sense of these," he said gruffly, a faint hint of respect in his tone. Amelia nodded, hiding a smile. It wasn't friendship, but it was enough. Ethan remained her anchor. Their coffee runs a weekly ritual. He teased her about her meticulous filing system, while she'd rib him about his messy flight logs. Their conversations drifted from work to dreams, his of flying advanced jets, hers of publishing a book on Nellie's history. One evening, as they walked across the base under a pink desert sunset, Ethan stopped. "You ever think about what you did that day?" he asked. "Not just saving me, but changing your whole life." Amelia paused, the Air Force pin heavy in her pocket. "I think about it every day," she admitted. "It's why I'm here." Her work began to draw attention beyond Nellie's. A university in Nevada invited her to speak at a history conference, citing her archive project. Nervous but excited, Amelia prepared a presentation, weaving in her dad's stories and her own. The night before, she practiced in her small apartment, her voice steadying with each run-through. Ethan showed up to wish her luck, bringing a takeout pizza. "You're gonna kill it," he said, his confidence infectious. At the conference, she spoke to a packed room, her slides filled with photos of her dad's manuals and Nellie's jets. The applause was warm, and a professor approached afterward, suggesting a grant to expand her work. Amelia's heart raced. This could be her future. But not everyone was a fan. Greg Thompson, apparently still a Nellie's regular, had caught wind of her speech. He posted online again, calling her a glorified tourist who'd lucked into a job. The post stung, but Amelia didn't respond. Instead, she shared it with Ethan, who laughed. "He's obsessed," he said. "You're living rent-free in his head." Amelia grinned, realizing Greg's words held no power anymore. She was building something real, something lasting. Back at Nellie's, she threw herself into the grant proposal, working late nights. Olivia noticed, pulling her aside one day. "You're doing more than preserving history," she said. "You're inspiring people." Amelia blushed, thinking of her dad. She wasn't just saving stories, she was creating her own. As she left the office, the desert stars bright above, she felt a certainty she'd never known. She was exactly where she was meant to be, no longer breaking formation but leading it. Amelia's grant proposal was approved, a milestone that felt like a nod from the universe. The funding allowed her to expand the Nellie's archive, digitizing records and creating an online database for researchers and veterans. She hired Liam, the teenage aviation nerd from Boise, as a summer intern. His enthusiasm lit up the office, though his habit of blasting jet engine sounds through his headphones made her laugh. "You're gonna deafen us all," she teased, but she loved his energy. The project grew, and so did her confidence. She wasn't just preserving her dad's legacy. She was building a bridge between past and future. Ethan's schedule grew hectic with advanced training, but he made time to check in. One weekend, he invited her to a base airshow, a public event packed with roaring jets and cheering crowds. Amelia hesitated. She'd avoided public Nellie's events since the tour, but Ethan insisted. "You're not a tourist anymore," he said. "You're one of us." At the airshow, she stood beside him, watching F-22s streak across the sky. The crowd's excitement was electric, and for the first time, Amelia felt like she belonged. Ethan nudged her, pointing to a pilot waving from a cockpit. "That's my buddy Nate. Told him about you. He says you're a legend." The compliment warmed her, but old ghosts lingered. She spotted Greg Thompson in the crowd, his bomber jacket unmistakable. He was holding court with a group, likely spinning tailies of his insider knowledge. Amelia tensed, but Ethan caught her expression. "Ignore him," he said. "He's got nothing on you." She nodded, focusing on the jets. Later, as she helped at the archives booth, showcasing her dad's manuals, a visitor approached Major Olivia Bennett. "Your work's making waves," Olivia said. "We're nominating you for a Civilian Service Award." Amelia's jaw dropped. An award. She stammered a thank you, overwhelmed. Greg's presence faded as the day went on. She overheard him complaining about the archive booth, calling it overhyped. But a young girl, maybe 10, approached Amelia, eyes wide. "Did you really save a pilot?" she asked, clutching a model jet. Amelia smiled, sharing a simplified version of the story. The girl beamed, saying, "I want to be like you when I grow up." Amelia's heart swelled. She handed the girl a replica Air Force pin, feeling her dad's presence in the moment. That night, Ethan drove her back to her apartment. "You're changing things, Amelia," he said softly. "Not just for Nellie's, but for people like that kid." She looked out at the desert, the stars bright above. The grant, the award nomination, the girls, it all felt like proof she'd found her place. Greg's taunts, Bradley's skepticism, they were noise, not truth. She touched her Air Force pin, thinking of her dad. "I'm not stopping," she whispered to herself, ready for whatever came next. Her story wasn't just about breaking formation. It was about building something that would last. The Civilian Service Award nomination sent ripples through Amelia's world. Nellie's buzzed with chatter about her work, and her small office became a hub for curious airmen and historians. Liam, her intern, was thrilled, plastering the nomination letter on the wall. "You're basically famous," he said, grinning. Amelia rolled her eyes but couldn't hide her pride. The nomination wasn't just for her. It was for her dad, for every pilot whose stories she preserved. She dove deeper into the archive, uncovering logs from the Vietnam era, her fingers tracing names of pilots who'd never made it home. Each one felt like a promise to keep their memory alive. Ethan's training took him away for weeks, but he sent voice messages, his tone warm despite the static. "Heard about the nomination," he said in one. "You're making Nellie's proud." Amelia saved the message, listening to it on tough days when self-doubt crept in. She missed their easy banter, but his absence pushed her to focus. The online database was live now, drawing praise from universities and veterans groups. A retired general emailed, thanking her for digitizing his squadron's records. "My grandkids can see what we did," he wrote. Amelia printed the email, tucking it beside her dad's photo. Not everyone was impressed. Greg Thompson, still a Nellie's regular, cornered her at a base event, his face flushed. "This award stuff is a joke," he said, his voice low but sharp. "You got lucky once and now you're some hero." Amelia's stomach tightened, but she held his gaze. "I'm doing my job," she said evenly. "What are you doing?" Greg sputtered, unused to her confidence, and walked off. Later, she overheard him complaining to a tour group, but no one seemed to care. His influence was waning, and Amelia realized she didn't need to prove herself to him or anyone. Major Olivia Bennett called her in for a meeting, her tone warm but serious. "The award's a big deal," she said, "but it comes with scrutiny. Keep your work tight." Amelia nodded, understanding the pressure. She spent late nights double-checking records, ensuring every detail was perfect. Liam stayed too, his energy keeping her going. "You're like Indiana Jones, but for plain stuff," he joked, making her laugh. The award ceremony was weeks away, and Amelia prepared a speech, her nerves mixing with excitement. She wanted to honor her dad, Ethan, and everyone who'd believed in her. The night before the ceremony, Ethan surprised her back from training. He showed up at her apartment with takeout and a grin. "Couldn't miss your big day," he said. They talked late, sharing stories of their dads, both pilots, both larger than life. As he left, he squeezed her hand. "You're not just saving pilots anymore," he said. "You're saving history." Amelia stood at her door, watching him go, her heart full. Tomorrow she'd step onto a stage, not as a tourist, but as a woman who'd earned her place. Her dad's pin gleamed in her pocket, ready for the moment. The award ceremony was held in a Nellie's hangar, transformed with lights and rows of chairs. Amelia sat near the front, her heart pounding as Major Olivia Bennett took the stage. The crowd, pilots, staff, and families, listened as Olivia described Amelia's work, digitizing records, preserving history, and inspiring a new generation. Her courage began with a single act, Olivia said, referencing the bird strike. But her impact will last decades. Amelia's eyes stung as she walked to the stage, accepting the Civilian Service Award. Her speech was short but heartfelt, dedicating it to her dad and the pilots whose stories she kept alive. The applause was thunderous, and Ethan in the crowd gave her a proud nod. After, people swarmed her, veterans sharing stories, airmen asking about her database. Liam, there with his parents, hugged her tightly. "Told you you're a legend," he whispered. Even Captain Bradley Myers approached, his handshake stiff but genuine. "Good work, Dawson," he said, and Amelia sensed the grudge was gone. She scanned the crowd, half expecting Greg Thompson's sneer, but he wasn't there. Later, she learned he'd been quietly asked to limit his base visits. His online rants had crossed a line. It wasn't revenge, but it felt like justice. Amelia's database grew into a national resource, with museums and universities linking to it. She published a small book, a collection of pilot stories from her dad's era, dedicating it to him. At the launch, Ethan surprised her again, flying in from a training mission. "You're unstoppable," he said, his eyes warm. Their friendship had deepened, teetering on something more, but neither pushed it. For now, their shared history was enough. Amelia felt her dad in every step, his courage, his love for the skis. She wasn't flying jets, but she was keeping their legacy aloft. Back at Nellie's, she mentored new archivists, including Liam, who'd enrolled in college for history. Her office was now a hub, filled with laughter and the hum of scanners. One day, a package arrived, a letter from the girl at the airshow, now 12, who'd called Amelia her hero. "I'm studying aviation because of you," it read, with a drawing of a jet. Amelia pinned it to her wall next to her dad's photo. The tourist label was long gone. She was Amelia Dawson, archivist, historian, and a woman who turned one reckless moment into a life of purpose. Years later, at a Nellie's memorial for fallen pilots, Amelia stood beside Ethan, her book in hand. The desert wind carried the roar of jets overhead. She touched her Air Force pin, now worn from years of carrying it. "We did good, Dad," she whispered. Ethan squeezed her shoulder, his presence steady. She wasn't just saving stories anymore, she was part of them. And as the jets soared, she knew she'd found her place, not by breaking formation, but by building one that would endure. Amelia's work at Nellie's became a cornerstone of her life, but it wasn't without challenges. The database's success brought more responsibility, overseeing a team, managing grants, and handling requests from historians worldwide. She thrived under the pressure, but late nights left her exhausted. Liam, now a college freshman, helped during breaks, his enthusiasm a reminder of why she'd started. "You're like the keeper of the skis," he said once, making her laugh. But the weight of preserving so many stories sometimes felt heavy. especially when she uncovered logs of pilots who died young, like her dad might have if luck hadn't been on his side. Ethan's career soared too. He was promoted to captain, leading training missions. Their coffee runs became less frequent, but their bond held. One evening, he invited her to a quiet spot near the runway where they watched jets take off against a blazing sunset. "I'm being reassigned," he said, his voice low. "Germany, 2 years." Amelia's chest tightened. She'd known this day might come. Pilots moved, lives shifted, but it still stung. "You'll be back," she said, forcing a smile. He nodded, his hand brushing hers. "You're my reason to," he said, and the words hung between them, unspoken possibilities shimmering in the desert heat. Amelia threw herself into her work to fill the gap. She launched a podcast, Voices of Nellies, featuring veteran stories. It gained a small but loyal following, with listeners emailing their own memories. One episode featured Harold, her old library friend, who'd moved to Nevada to be closer to the project. His gravelly voice recounting F-16 repairs brought tears to her eyes. The podcast caught the attention of a documentary filmmaker who proposed a film about Nellie's history. Amelia hesitated. Cameras weren't her thing, but Liam and Harold pushed her. "You're the face of this," Harold said. She agreed, nervous but proud. The past resurfaced in small ways. A new tour guide mentioned Greg Thompson, now banned from Nellie's after too many complaints. Amelia felt no satisfaction, only closure. He'd been a loud voice, but a small one in the end. Her focus was forward, mentoring her team, planning the film, and teaching a local history class. At one class, a student asked about her Nellie's story. She told it simply, no longer shying from the tourist label. It was part of her journey, not her definition. When Ethan returned on leave, he surprised her at a podcast recording, slipping into the back. After, they walked under the stars, talking like no time had passed. "I read your book in Germany," he said. "Made me miss you." Amelia's heart skipped, but she kept it light. "Missed your bad coffee runs," she teased. As he laughed, she felt her dad's pin in her pocket, a quiet anchor. She wasn't chasing his shadow anymore. She was carving her own path, one story at a time, with room for new ones to begin. The documentary project pushed Amelia into uncharted territory. Filming at Nellie's meant coordinating with base officials, managing her team, and stepping in front of cameras, something that made her stomach churn. She'd always been more comfortable behind the scenes, but the director, a kind but insistent woman named Rachel, saw Amelia as the story's heart. "You're not just an archivist," Rachel said. "You're the bridge between these pilots and the world." Amelia nodded, gripping her Air Force pin for courage. The first day on set, she stumbled through her lines, but Liam, assisting as a runner, gave her a thumbs up. "You're Captain Dawson," he whispered, and she found her footing. The film, Wings of Nellies, wove her dad's manuals with pilot interviews and her own story. Ethan, back for a brief visit, appeared in it, recounting the bird strike. His easy smile on camera made Amelia's heart flutter, but she pushed the feeling aside. Their friendship was a constant, but his reassignment loomed. Filming wrapped with a scene at the runway, Amelia standing where she'd once sprinted to the gate. Rachel called it poetic, and Amelia felt her dad's presence in the desert wind. The premiere was set for a national aviation festival, and Amelia was invited to speak. The festival was overwhelming, crowds, jets roaring overhead, and her face on posters. She spotted Major Olivia Bennett in the audience, her nod a quiet endorsement. Amelia's speech was raw, tying her dad's legacy to the pilots she honored. The crowd gave a standing ovation, and Rachel hugged her afterward. "This is just the start," she said. Amelia wasn't sure what that meant, but the words sparked something. Later, Ethan found her, his eyes bright. "You're a force," he said. They shared a quiet moment, the unspoken tension between them heavier now. But he was leaving again, and she wasn't ready to cross that line. Back at Nellie's, the documentary's success brought more funding, letting Amelia expand the archive into a small museum wing. She curated exhibits, including one on her dad's squadron. Liam, now a history major, helped design it, his pride evident. One day, a letter arrived from the girl who'd met Amelia at the airshow, now a high schooler applying to aviation programs. "You showed me I could do this," she wrote. Amelia framed the letter, her eyes misty. The tourist label was a distant memory, replaced by a legacy of her own. Ethan's next visit was unannounced. He showed up at the museum wing's opening, his captain's bars gleaming. "I'm back for good," he said, his smile tentative. Amelia's breath caught. They walked through the exhibit, her dad's manuals displayed under glass. "You built this," Ethan said, his hand finding hers. She didn't pull away. The desert stars shone above, and her pin felt warm in her pocket. She saved a pilot once, but now she was saving stories and maybe, just maybe, opening her heart to one. The museum wing's opening marked a pinnacle for Amelia, but it also brought new pressures. She was now a public figure in aviation circles, invited to speak at events across the country. Her quiet librarian days felt like another life. She loved the work, but the spotlight was daunting. At one conference, a historian asked how she'd transitioned from tourist to trailblazer. Amelia laughed, sharing her Nellie's story with ease now. The label didn't sting. It was a badge of her journey. But late at night, alone in her apartment, she'd touch her dad's pin and wonder if she was enough to carry this forward. Ethan's return to Nellie's steadied her. He was stationed there permanently now, and their coffee runs resumed, now laced with a new ease. They didn't talk about his hand-holding at the museum opening, but the moment lingered. One evening, he invited her to a quiet dinner off base, just the two of them. Over tacos, he admitted, "I thought about you every day in Germany." Amelia's heart raced, but she kept it light. "Hope I didn't distract you from flying," she teased. He laughed, but his eyes were serious. "You're why I wanted to come back." She didn't know how to respond, but his words warmed her, a possibility she wasn't ready to name. Her work kept her grounded. The museum wing drew visitors from school groups to veterans. Amelia trained her team to lead tour, but she often joined, sharing stories of pilots like her dad. One day, a familiar face appeared, Corinne Walsh, the civilian guide from her tour years ago. Corinne hugged her, eyes shining. "I knew you were special," she said. Amelia blushed, showing her the exhibit. Corinne's pride felt like a blessing, a link to that chaotic day that had changed everything. The past resurfaced in a new way when Amelia found a logbook mentioning her dad, a mission he'd never told her about, a near miss that mirrored her own actions. She cried reading it, feeling closer to him than ever. She added it to the exhibit, her voice steady as she shared it with visitors. Liam, now interning full-time, suggested a new podcast series on unsung pilots, starting with her dad. They recorded it together, his enthusiasm fueling her. The episode went viral and messages poured in from listeners who'd known her dad. "He'd be so proud," one wrote. Amelia believed it. Ethan joined her for the next episode, sharing his own stories. Their chemistry crackled through the mic and listeners noticed, flooding the comments with speculation. Amelia laughed it off, but Ethan didn't. "They're not wrong," he said after, his voice soft. She met his gaze, her dad's pin heavy in her pocket. The desert night stretched around them, full of promise. She'd broken formation once to save him, and now she was ready to break her own walls. "Let's see where this goes," she said, her smile shy but sure. Her story wasn't over, it was soaring higher than ever. Amelia's life at Nellie's settled into a vibrant rhythm, blending her work with a growing connection to Ethan. The museum wing thrived, with new exhibits added monthly. She and Liam curated a display on women pilots, drawing crowds and praise. Her podcast grew too, each episode a tribute to the unsung, mechanics, navigators, and pilots like her dad. Listeners sent letters, some sharing their own stories, others thanking her for keeping history alive. One came from the young girl, now a college freshman studying aerospace. "You're why I'm here," she wrote. Amelia pinned the letter next to her dad's photo, her heart full. Ethan was a constant now, their dinners and walks a quiet routine. He'd tease her about her meticulous notes, she'd mock his terrible taste in diner coffee. But the unspoken tension between them grew. One night under the runway lights he stopped walking. "Amelia, I'm all in," he said, his voice steady. "Are you?" Her breath caught. She'd spent years guarding her heart, anchored by her dad's memory and her work. But Ethan saw her, really saw her. She touched her Air Force pin, then took his hand. "I am," she said, her voice soft but certain. Their first kiss felt like a jet breaking the sound barrier, a rush she hadn't expected. Her work didn't slow. The documentary, Wings of Nellies, won an award, and Amelia was invited to a national history conference to present it. She brought Liam, who'd become like a younger brother. On stage, she spoke of her dad, the bird strike, and the archive's impact. The crowd's standing ovation was humbling, but Liam's proud grin meant more. Backstage, Major Olivia Bennett approached. "You're not just preserving history," she said. "You're making it." Amelia thanked her, thinking of Bradley Meyer's old skepticism. He'd retired recently, leaving a brief note. "You proved me wrong, Dawson." It was closure she hadn't sought but welcomed. The past felt distant now, even Greg Thompson's taunts. She heard he'd moved, his online rants forgotten. Her focus was forward, expanding the museum, mentoring Liam, and building a life with Ethan. They moved in together, a small house near the base, her dad's manuals on a shelf by the door. One evening, sorting through old records, she found a letter her dad had written to her mom, describing a flight that felt like freedom. Amelia read it to Ethan, her voice cracking. "That's you now," he said, pulling her close. "Free." At a Nellie's memorial, Amelia unveiled a new exhibit dedicated to her dad and the pilots who'd shaped her. Ethan stood beside her, his hand in hers. The jets roared overhead, and she felt her dad's pin in her pocket, a quiet anchor. She'd come to Nellie's as a tourist, but she'd built a legacy, stories saved, lives touched, and a love that soared. As the crowd cheered, she whispered to her dad, "We're still flying." And she knew they always would.